Hello everyone, and welcome to this WBCSD webinar, where we're proud to introduce our new SDG Roadmap for the oil and gas sector. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Becky Collicott, Senior Manager for Sustainable Development at IPECA, and I'm really delighted to welcome you all to this session. We're thrilled to be joined by an excellent panel of speakers. We have Bahara Saidi, who is Senior Sustainable Development Officer from the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Filippo Veglio, who is Managing Director from the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, who are our partners in this roadmap project, and Brian Sullivan, who's Executive Director at IPECA, and then representatives from some of our member companies. So we have Mar Granados Calatrava, who is ESG Reporting Manager at Repsol, Lise Rodionov, Chief Sustainability Officer at Schlumberger, Boris Romes, who's Sustainability and ESG Officer at ExxonMobil, and Penelope Semoran, who's responsible for SDG Accountability at Total. So we have an hour today, and we're going to spend around 45 minutes on presentations. Firstly, setting the scene and introducing our roadmap with a status update on global progress towards the SDGs, setting out the important role for business in achieving the SDGs, and then an introduction to our roadmap for the oil and gas sector. After that, we will hear from our four companies, Repsol, Schlumberger, ExxonMobil, and Total, who will each tell us a little bit about their SDG journey and how they plan to use this roadmap. All of these companies have been active participants in the development of the project, so it's a really excellent set of perspectives today. And then we will dedicate the last 15 minutes to your questions. So just before we begin, I need to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are a number of buttons for tools you can use during the webinar. You can find speaker bios, links to the relevant documents, and when you click on these, you'll find that all the tools are resizable and movable. So do feel free to move them around your desktop to make the most of your space. And you can also expand your slide area or even maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows. And importantly, if you have any questions throughout, please do feel free to submit them through the Q&A tool. This presentation will be recorded, and all who registered will receive a follow-up email containing a link to the presentation. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Bahara from the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs to say a few words.
Thank you, Becky. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. And I'm very glad to be here with you all today. As Becky mentioned, I have a few slides, and my presentation will focus broadly on the SDGs, and I will zoom in a little bit on SDG 7, which is the energy goal as we move forward. So hopefully by now you're all familiar with the Sustainable Development Goal and the 2030 Agenda. This was agreed to by all member states of the United Nations in 2015. It is the first global agenda that brings together the three strands of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. The 17 goals include goals related to social progress, such as education, health, gender empowerment, goals related to economic development, such as economic inequality, poverty, and goals related to the environment, such as climate change, biodiversity, oceans, and so on. The goals are meant to be implemented in an integrated way and not in isolation from one another. And this is quite a different approach compared to the agenda that was there previous to the 2030 agenda. Now, as I mentioned before, there is a specific goal on energy that is goal number 7. This is the first time that there is a goal dedicated to energy in a global agenda on sustainable development. And as many of you may know, energy is an enabler to many other development issues, including poverty eradication, reducing inequality, and empowering gender, and of course, climate change. SDG 7 has 3 main targets. The first one is on universal access, second on renewable energy, and the third on energy efficiency. There are 2 additional targets, and those we call implementing the cross-cutting elements. One focuses on international cooperation, including finance, and the second one focuses on infrastructure and technology. And now, over the years, there are a number of bodies that look at the progress around the SDGs, and on annual bases report back. So one of them is what we call the SDGs report that is submitted by the United Nations Secretary General to the world. This is happening on an annual basis, and it looks at every single goal in the 17 goals and every single target. And every year you will see progress globally around each of these goals. There is also a body of work that is dedicated to SDG 7 on energy in particular. That report is called the Energy Progress Report and is the combination of 3 global expertise institutions who are really the leaders in this sector, who come together and report back on the progress on SDG 7. So the information that you will see in the next slide are from these reports. This one shows the overall progress on the 2030 agenda and the impact of COVID-19 as we're currently experiencing. So just to put it in context, before the pandemic, there were progress on many of the goals, including the ones related to poverty, improving maternal and child care, increasing access to electricity, and advancing gender equality. However, broadly, even before the pandemic, the progress was slow and we were not on track to achieve the goals by 2030. Now, with the pandemic, not only progress was stalled on some of these goals, but progress was also reversed in some cases. For example, an additional 119 to 124 million people were pushed back into extreme poverty in 2020. In 2020, again, the equivalent of 255 million full-time jobs were lost. 101 million children and youth fell below the minimum reading proficiency levels, and 10 million additional girls are at risk of child marriage in the next decades because of the pandemic. Now, on climate specifically, there is no evidence that the economic slowdown from the pandemic has caused any slowdown in climate change. In fact, in 2020, we saw a rise in the global emissions, and the global average temperature was about 1.2 degrees, which is dangerously close to the 1.5 degrees goal of the Paris Agreement. Similarly, on the environmental goals, we were not on track to achieve the 2020 targets on biodiversity, and about 10 million hectares of forests were lost per year between 2015 and 2020. Now, zooming in on energy goal, the first, as I mentioned, target is on electricity. So we have seen progress over the decades on electricity access. From 2010 to 2018, for example, we went from 83% to 90%, which is a good progress. However, to date, we're still at a level where 700 million people in the world don't have access to electricity. Interesting thing about COVID is that it really shows the importance of access to electricity, given that it really is related to adequate healthcare facilities who are able to provide services such as vaccination to the populations at large. If you look at the numbers again closely, 70% of people who don't have access to electricity are in sub-Saharan Africa. 85% live in rural areas. A half live in low-income economies, and a third are in fragile states. And this really shows you those who don't have access at the moment are the most vulnerable people in the world. The second target is access to clean cooking. Again, there's been progress over the years on this. From 2010 to 2018, we have seen an increase in the rates of access to clean cooking fuels from 56% to 63%. However, we are still short of the goal by 2030, and we have 2.8 billion people who still use inefficient fuels for cooking and heating, and that has adverse effects on their health, on their environment, and on social progress as a whole. Second target on renewable energy. Again, you're very familiar with the energy revolution that has taken place in the last decade due to the market penetration of some technologies such as solar and wind. So there has been progress. However, we are still below 20% of global share of renewables in the overall energy consumption rate. So it is certainly not where we need to be, and drastic measures are needed to increase the global share of renewables in the overall mix. If you look at international cooperation and finance specifically, the good news is that support to developing countries in terms of financial flows on renewable energy projects and technologies doubled between 2010 and 2017. But a closer look will tell you that only 12% of that has gone to the least developed countries. So again, the concept of leaving no one behind and the importance of making sure we reach out to the most vulnerable as we strive towards the achievement of the SDGs is evident in this goal. Energy efficiency is the third target. Progress has been made here as well. However, we are at 2.6% per annum in terms of efficiency rate improvement, and we need to reach 3% per annum. So we're still short on that target as well. Now, what's the outlook? The outlook is that if we continue the way we have been, we will see numbers substantially lagging by 2030. 620 million people will still have no access to electricity. 2.3 million people will still use inefficient cooking fuels. And the renewable target will drastically be behind what the international recommendation from institutions such as the IEA and IRENA tell us, that we need to decarbonize the energy systems of the world and move towards the decarbonization of all end users as well. Similarly, energy efficiency improvements per annum would remain at 2.3%, which is still below the recommended level per annum as recommended by experts. Now, there are a number of upcoming meetings and events and what we want to call milestones and moments that are designed in the UN system to look at progress made on the SDGs and to really provide an opportunity for countries, businesses, and other stakeholders to ramp up action and ambition. The most immediate one is called the High Level Political Forum. This usually happens in July. And every year it looks at a number of goals. And that's where the annual report on the SDG progress is launched. And it's really an opportunity for different stakeholders to come and discuss where are the challenges and bottlenecks and how do we move forward. The next one is the United Nations General Assembly. This happens in September. And this year in particular is quite important because there is a dedicated discussion at the level of presidents and prime ministers and heads of states on energy in particular in September of this year. This has not happened in 40 years. So it's quite an important moment to look at progress specifically on SDG 7 and see what needs to be done to get us to 2030 and the net zero goal of the Paris Agreement by 2050. And of course, there's this year is also important on climate as we're heading towards the COP in November. And as many of you may know, we are lagging behind on the climate goals. And there is a momentum there to have businesses and countries and all stakeholders to raise ambition on their climate targets and plans. Just a little bit of an information on the energy dialogue in September. As I mentioned, this is the first time in 40 years that a dedicated meeting on energy is happening at the heads of state level. The focus is really to look at the gap that we see on achieving the SDGs by 2030 and the net zero goal of the Paris Agreement by 2050, and to really come up with an ambitious global effort that can accelerate progress towards these agendas simultaneously. The outcomes, there are 3 outcomes for this dialogue specifically. One is that there's a global map that is being crafted at the moment. That global map will have key recommendations on key issues related to energy and the SDGs, including energy access, energy transition, issues related to finance, technology, and issues related to just transition. The second outcome is energy compacts. This is really voluntary commitments that could be developed and submitted by all stakeholders, including businesses. It really is a plan of actions that demonstrate there is momentum around these issues and actors are already acting on it, and that there is an opportunity to accelerate progress as we move towards 2030 and beyond. And lastly, there will be a network of multi-stakeholders from the dialogue that will continue the work beyond September to ensure progress is made and the goals are reached. Just a few words about energy compacts, given this is an opportunity for all of you to engage in. As I mentioned, the point of it is really to demonstrate action and commitment around key issues related to the SDGs, and in particular, the goal on energy. It is open to everyone, including governments, businesses, civil society, and so on. And it really is meant to build on existing activities and actions. So for all of you who are heavily engaged in the work on SDGs, this is an opportunity to showcase the actions that you're pursuing and bring that to the international attention. There are a number of resources on this particular dialogue on energy. There's a website that you can go to, and a number of documents have been developed on the energy compact in particular. Of course, there's an opportunity to reach out to us at any time for more information if that is of interest to you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions in the end if there's any, and over to you, Becky. I'm going to stop here.
Thank you so much, Mahira. That's just really interesting and focuses our minds, I think, on the importance of the SDGs framework, but also a bit of a stark reminder that there's quite a lot more that we need to do. So I'd now like to invite Filippo from WBCSD to explain the important role for business in this.
Hi, Becky. Good day to everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Pleased to be here for the second round of webinars this week, and pleased to share the stage with you and Desan and the companies, and of course IPICA, a great partner of WBCSD, and building on this work that we're excited to present today around the sector roadmaps. I will just do a few introductory remarks in terms of the why sector roadmaps and how we see the perspective around these roadmaps, building not only on the work of the oil and gas sector, which Brian Sullivan will present right after me, but also on the back of a handful of other roadmaps that we have developed over the past 3 years. So allow me just a few slides to do that. I think it's 6 slides in total. First of all, for those who are not familiar with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, it's an association of 200 companies spread out across the world, united by the vision that you see outlined here, 9+ billion people living well within planetary boundaries by the middle of the century, and united by the idea that business leadership is vital, necessary to advance the transition, to accelerate the transition to a more sustainable future. As I mentioned, companies, 200 spread out across the world and also spread out across sectors. We have a good representation from the oil and gas sector, but overall representation from about 20 industry sectors. And if we take headquarter of companies, slightly over 40 countries represented in our council. The World Business Council is headquartered in Geneva, but has offices in a handful of other locations across the world, and really a global membership. The Sustainable Development Goals, our colleague from UNDESA introduced them, a vital, universal, ambitious agenda where we believe, alongside IPICA and many other organizations, that there is a crucial role, a responsibility, but also an opportunity for business to bring about solutions, innovations, processes, products, services. What business does best is to develop these various lines and, of course, act as a key engine, as we all know, of employment, a key enabler of technology and innovation, developer also of technology and innovation, a fundamental role around finance, but also a fundamental role around respect of human rights. So the SDGs will not be achieved without business of all sizes, of all sectors, and there is a fundamental role, opportunity, and responsibility for companies, from our point of view, to contribute actively through a core business lens to this important and vital agenda for the world, even more so in light of the current COVID tragedy and crisis and slowdown, even further slowdown on progress, be it in the social or the environmental domain. With regard to sector roadmaps, very briefly, to position the idea that they emerge from interesting and useful work that was done by 36 companies and institutions a few years ago, back in 2016 and 17, the Business and Sustainable Development Commission issuing this Better Business, Better World call to action, but also a report outlining what specifically is the business case for the SDGs, how can business best contribute to it, and what should business think about as it looks at the SDGs through that business lens. And one of the 5 key recommendations that emerged from that work, and we are building on that as IPCA and WBCSD, is the idea of sector roadmaps as a key tangible ways of landing the SDGs into actionable areas for a given sector. The World Business Council took the initiative on the back of this report to develop a methodology. We were supported by ERM in that process to think through how would you develop a roadmap, how would you go about outlining key areas of engagement around this roadmap. The first, as you can see on this slide here, in a simplified way, the process that we articulate is for each and every sector to think along 3 particular steps. What is your current position as a sector with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals? How do you map the SDG impacts across your value chain? And which are priority material SDGs for your individual sector? Out of that analysis of the current position, how do you then move to the second stage, which is to say, all right, where are the impact opportunities? Where can we have a maximization of positive impact, and where do we need to think of minimizing negative impact? So out of that, then the third step, which goes beyond the analysis to then the action orientation. So really thinking through the SDGs as an action opportunity for the sector to really land them in terms of the identification of barriers, of potential solution areas, and of accelerators for impact. And of course, the layout of short, medium, and long-term actions to advance those impact opportunities, coupled with a mechanism to monitor progress. So in a simplified and short time frame, this is sort of the three, let's say, blocks around roadmaps that we have established, and that will come back also in the work to be presented by Brian Sullivan. I was alluding to this very briefly before, that the World Business Council is pleased to look back on a good track record now of sectors who wanted to lead within individual companies wanting to lead the development of these roadmaps. We were very grateful to the chemical, to the forest sector, and to the electric utilities sector, alongside, of course, the oil and gas sector, for taking a stab at this, for saying, within our sector, what is a leadership position looking like? How do we establish this roadmap on the back of these 3 blocks, these milestones that I outlined before? And you see here the wide variety of companies alongside a good set of industry associations that participated in this effort. All of this information is publicly available and downloadable to see, for those who are interested over and beyond the oil and gas sector, what has been developed and what are the roadmaps of action along the way. What are not only the reports and the roadmaps, but an important last message from my side is, on behalf of the Council, is to say the roadmap is really not a document meant to sit on a shelf or in the digital, the digital world, in the drives or the clouds. It's very much meant to actually translate this ambition into action, and translate it also into action, as I mentioned, with regard to monitoring implementation. I just wanted to outline here that, for instance, the forest sector, having launched the sector roadmap slightly less than 2 years ago, has issued very recently its first implementation report, basically saying this is what we set out to do. Here is how far along we are as a sector with regard to what we set out to do, and here's where we still need to go. So an important element of this road mapping exercise is the action orientation, is the actionability of the SDGs, but also the monitoring of progress. And this is something that we are also setting in motion very strategically in collaboration with IPCA, given that IPCA is taking this roadmap back into its strategy, and Brian will explain a lot more. I will conclude, Becky, just with a link to the information where all of that information can be accessed in a spirit of transparency, but also in a spirit of motivating many, hopefully in the audience, to go visit and be inspired by the various sectors in terms of what they are doing, and remaining available also by our team for any questions or concerns, and of course remaining available for the Q&A section later on. So Becky, back to you, and thank you very much for this opportunity again.
Thanks so much, Filippo. I know I speak on behalf of IPCA when I say really appreciate all the efforts that the WBCSD is making to translate this laudable, sometimes slightly overwhelming agenda into more actionable areas for business. So now we turn to Brian from IPCA to tell us a little bit more about this sector-specific roadmap for the oil and gas industry. Brian.
Great, thanks very much, Becky. Just like to add my thanks to Filippo and WBCSD for being a fantastic partner in this process. Challenging, constructive, really pushing us to be as ambitious as we can in this particular area. And I'd also like to thank you and Dessa for supporting us with this webinar. We value their participation. So a little bit about IPCA before we get into the details of the roadmap, to set some context. So IPCA is the Global Oil and Gas Industry Association for Advancing Environmental and Social Performance. And we were founded in 1974 at the request of the UN Environment Programme, which had been formed the year before, to develop a shared industry response to environmental and social issues. And that's what we've been doing pretty much ever since. Our scope as a global industry association is unique in that it covers both upstream and downstream oil and gas. The members of IPCA operate in some 180 countries around the world. So you can see on here our membership. We're currently at 72 companies and associations, and we've actually grown quite a lot. We're almost double the size we were 10 years ago. And that's because the issues that we focus on are becoming ever increasingly important to our sector and the stakeholders of our sector. And that means that they want to come together to work with each other on these issues, because many of them are too big for individual companies or countries even to address on their own. So we have 43 companies, and you can see that we've got all the international oil companies, a fair number of national oil companies and independents and service companies. And we have some 29 national and regional industry associations who are also members and are a valuable channel for outreach to an even bigger network of oil and gas companies around the world. So the companies on there are responsible for around half the world's oil and gas production. So IPCA had its strategy signed off at the end of last year, and this strategy was developed in parallel. We knew the roadmap was on the way, and there have been a lot of tie-ins with the work of the roadmap as we developed our strategy. And at the heart of our strategy are the issues of the energy transition and sustainable development. And so our new vision is to advance the oil and gas industry's environmental and social performance and contribution to the energy transition in the context of sustainable development. And we'll come back to the energy transition and sustainable development in a minute, but it's not just words in the vision, it's underpinned by specific actions. And you'll see here that our key themes of activity align with themes in the roadmap. So we care about the climate, nature, people, and mainstreaming sustainability. And of course, the roadmap is a big contributor to that process. And in that, our role is to lead the industry on advancing climate action, environmental responsibility, social performance, and mainstreaming sustainability. So energy has been it's been described by others as a golden thread across all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and access to affordable and reliable energy is essential to support sustainable development. However, it means that we also have to achieve a transition to a low emissions future, and so achieving both those goals of maintaining or providing affordable, reliable energy and transitioning to a low emissions future will rely on global collaboration and support. I've mentioned already that these issues are far too big for individual companies, sectors, or countries to deal with on their own. And IPECA members recognise that they have a crucial role to play in supporting the energy transition and contributing to sustainable development. So IPECA has been working in the sustainable development area, or sustainable development as a topic hosted by the UN for many years now. And my first involvement was fairly soon after I started in IPECA almost 10 years ago, with the preparations for the Rio+20 summit, where a zero draft document was developed, which ultimately led to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals that were agreed at the General Assembly in 2015. Now, recognizing the industry, we recognize that we have a role to play in this, and as part of this, we decided to map our industry to the Sustainable Development Goals to establish a sort of a baseline of where we are in relation to each of the goals. And we did this in collaboration with the UN Development Programme and the International Finance Corporation, and we produced in 2017 an atlas that mapped the industry to all the goals. And one of our key findings is that the industry has a potential to contribute to progress against all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, recognising that there are some goals that we make a positive contribution through things like our investments in countries and revenues that result from that, but also recognising there are areas where our impacts are negative, and therefore that negative impact needs to be addressed, zeroed or reversed in a number of cases. So this atlas provided a sort of baseline in terms of where we are compared to the goals. It also contained advice for how to progress and case studies of good practice in support of each of the 17 goals. So the atlas was a good start. And then as we got to understand more about the work of WBCSD on sector roadmaps, it made a natural next step to collaborate with WBCSD in producing a sector roadmap for the oil and gas sector. Some 26 members of IPECA were involved in the development from a very broad range of interests across the membership, and several of the leading participants in the programme are speaking on this webinar today. So the launch of a roadmap, it was launched last month. It's an important milestone for us, but it's of course only just the start. And the roadmap itself provides a common vision for our sector in supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. And in this, first of all, one of the main things we did was we prioritised 10 SDGs that we believe are the ones where the industry has the greatest opportunity for impact. And you can see the 10 SDGs listed on the slide, along with Goal 17, Partnerships for the Goals, which sort of underpins everything, because every goal needs partnership in order to progress and to succeed. So we wanted to identify actions for the industry to have the greatest impact. They're ambitious, and they're actions for not just for the IPECA membership, but actions that the whole sector can pick up on and deliver in support of the 2030 agenda. And a key message from all this is that this is urgent. We're in the last decade before the 2030 deadline for achievement of the goals, so what we looked at in the roadmap is the timeline to make sure that we recognise the goals and actions which have the highest impact and the timelines required. So within the 10 SDGs, we've identified 8 impact opportunities where the oil and gas sector is best equipped to drive action. So looking at climate, we have areas such as policy and partnerships, innovation and operations. Looking at nature, it's about resources management, biodiversity, land and water stewardship. And then in people, governance and transparency, supporting communities and a thriving workforce. So to give a slightly deeper understanding of the actions in the roadmap, I'll give an example from each of the themes. So from climate, a good example is action number 12, which is establishing a dialogue with other sectors to share good practices and knowledge on leveraging gas infrastructure for hydrogen and other low carbon solutions. So this is an action for IPECA as an association. We recognise that it has a high level of potential impact on the SDGs and a short time frame requiring action in the near term. And so as part of that, we will have a publication coming up soon on hydrogen, which is a good starting point for further dialogue on the next steps for development of hydrogen as a form of energy. And this particular document is part of our Low Emissions Pathways series, which has been covered topics such as carbon capture and storage, low emissions transport, and so on. And hydrogen is an area where the oil and gas sector has experience, skills, and knowledge that can develop and scale up the production of hydrogen as a low carbon source of energy. And one of the things that we're looking to do as a result of the roadmap is to leverage this work and develop and strengthen relationships with other sectors on this particular issue. Looking at nature, the example we've chosen here is to lead the engagement with UN agencies, so UNEP and the UN Convention for Biodiversity, and other stakeholders to support international progress on biodiversity, water and air quality. UNEP and the recent UNEA 5, the UN Environment Assembly, has identified key priorities for 2020 and 2021, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and nature-based solutions. And these are all areas where we can provide input, support, and enable progress. We'll be engaging with the UN Convention for Biodiversity at their COP15, which will be happening later this year. We've developed statements of support, and we'll be there to provide technical information and also hear what other stakeholders would like to see the sector do in this particular area. We'll be active at World Water Week, which takes place later this year. And I'd like to also highlight that we've recently just signed a memorandum of understanding with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, where we'll be looking at ways to work together with them in order to support biodiversity and wider areas of the nature topic. And then on the people theme, we've got here an example which is assisting companies to understand the risks and opportunities of the energy transition to local communities in the context of engagement on the just transition. And this is an area of example of where IPECA is not just including the word energy transition in our vision, we're actually deploying the breadth of IPECA in support of energy transition issues. So our environment groups are looking at things like nature-based solutions and natural climate solutions. And our social responsibility group is taking the lead on just transition. We've just formed a just transition task force, and its objectives, apart from coming up with alignment on the use of a common definition, not a definition that we write, but more agreement on a definition by others, but also to agree the role of the industry in the just transition, identify examples of good practice from other related areas, and also to identify opportunities to collaborate with other sectors of society in supporting and enabling a just transition as we move towards a low emissions future. So overall, there are some, well, I've highlighted just 3, but there are actually 93 impact pathways or actions that are described in the roadmap. Some 46 actions are actions that IPECA will take as a group. And then there are 47 actions identified for individual companies across the 3 themes of climate, nature, and people, looking through the lenses of low, medium, or high impact, or short, medium, and long time frame. Just a thought here, reflecting on Bahira's comments from UNDESA, there's probably a tie-in here, perhaps, with the Energy Compacts initiative that she mentioned in her first session earlier. So next chapter for us, what's going to happen next? Well, we're hoping to continue our partnership with WBCSD, IUCN, and other stakeholders in supporting achievement of the actions in here. We're very focused on delivering the actions for IPECA, and these steps will be overseen by our executive committee and coordinated and led by our Sustainable Development Goals Task Force in collaboration with the other working groups and task forces across the spectrum of IPECA's activity. We'll be encouraging companies to engage with the roadmap, to pick it up, use it, deploy it, whether they're IPECA members or not. And we're also looking to amplify action throughout our supply chain. We have various ways to do that, leverage that through our relationships with other industry associations, and also through bodies such as our supply chain working group. And then we're aiming to report on progress and hold ourselves accountable for delivery on this. And so, yeah, we're very excited about it and really looking forward to achieving the results and delivering the outcome that we're aiming for from this roadmap. So just to wrap up, key messages from us is that the oil and gas sector can make significant contribution to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Partnerships and collaboration across business, government, and civil society will be key to realise the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Sustainable development is broader than net zero. It covers climate, nature, and people. And somehow we have to work together to achieve all the aims of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the roadmap will help us focus our efforts and hopefully and every player in the industry to make a difference. And if you want to access the roadmap, we have the website there, or the IPECA website, of course, is another route to get there. So I'll leave it there and hand it back to Becky.
Thank you very much, Brian. I think that really helps to show the amount of work that's behind this project and also gives a taste of the amount of detail that's within the roadmap as well. So now we start the next section of our agenda and hear from some companies. I'd like to start with some remarks from Repsol. So I'd like to welcome Mar Granados-Calatrava, who is ESG Reporting Manager at Repsol, and also our IPECA SDG Task Force Champion. So over to you, Mar.
Thank you, Becky. So just a short introduction of who we are. So Repsol is an international multi-energy company, and our headquarters are based in Madrid, Spain, and our activity ranges from oil and gas exploration and production to refinery as well, selling derivative products and providing service such as natural gas and electricity. And just what we have already done regarding to Sustainable Development Goals. So Repsol have supported the 2030 agenda since its approval in 2015, and we're working to contribute at all levels and in all company businesses. In 2018, we analyzed and identified the SDGs to which we contribute the most as an energy company. And there, we began to incorporate them into our sustainability strategy. Each year, through our Global Sustainability Plan, we commit to more than 35 annual initiatives and medium-term goals in line with the 2030 Agenda. And all these initiatives are deployed in 20 local sustainability plans for the different countries and industrial facilities in which we operate. All these documents are publicly available in our website. And for the last 2 years, Repsol has been publishing an annual SDG report to which we demonstrate our contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. And last June 2020, we launched a dynamic training course that is pretending to be like a social media environment to disseminate the 2030 agenda between all our employees, and in which we highlighted Repsol initiatives that have the greatest positive impact on the Sustainable Development Goal. So this training course is also now available for our contractors and providers in order to expand this 2030 agenda awareness in our supply chain. So why do we believe that the roadmap is important? The roadmap for our sector is important because of the opportunities arising from it. In it, we can find inspiration for our strategy and activities, and inspiration to improve the integration of the SDGs into the company's business activities. The roadmap provides also actions that can assist us to take advantage of emerging opportunities in terms of new projects and products, especially relevant when we're talking about new and emerging low carbon solutions and products. And as Brian said before, it gives us opportunities for collaboration and multi-stakeholder dialogue. And also is a help to manage regulatory risk, because we believe that a proactive approach to the Sustainable Development Goals help us to manage regulatory risk and facilitate us access to the sustainable financial products, which are lately becoming increasingly attractive to investors. So what are we going to use, or how we are going to use the SDG roadmap to? We're going to use it to raise awareness within the company. And we're going to use it to engage with our stakeholders, because we think that the roadmap can be the basis for a discussion with our stakeholders to identify their expectations. Knowing the stakeholders' expectations regarding the different opportunities that are included in the roadmap can help us to prioritize these actions into the company's strategy, and also can help us to build trust once we show progress on these actions that we have included in our business plans. And also we're going to use it to review our sustainability goals and our key action lines against the roadmap in order to start internal discussions with the aim of increasing the ambition in those impact pathways aligned with the company's strategy and aligned with the company's long-term vision. And this is it. Becky, I give the floor to you.
Thanks so much, Mar. That's really interesting to hear. Our next speaker was Lise from Schlumberger, but unfortunately she's having connectivity issues, so won't be able to join us just now. So I'd like to move on to ExxonMobil's view. So Boris Hormus, who's Sustainability and ESG Reporting Manager, would love to hear your company perspective.
Hello, everyone. Just a quick introduction to ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil is an integrated oil and gas company with operations around the globe. We operate upstream, midstream, downstream, and chemical business. Some steps we took to promote roadmap awareness and education. We engaged and communicated to our senior business line and corporate leaders. We communicated to our sustainability managers and asked them to understand the document and how the company contributes to the SDGs. We also expect that this document will inform our corporate and sustainability reporting. Some of the ways we're tracking impact pathways, we are actively working with APICA on their pathways and their work streams. And for the company pathways, ExxonMobil continues to work its plans. Some of the examples of ExxonMobil actions related to the SDG roadmap. On climate, we formed a low carbon solution business in this year to commercialize and deploy emission reduction technologies, including CCS and hydrogen. We also actively engage in climate-related policy discussions. ExxonMobil supports the 2015 Paris Agreement. In 2017, we became a founding member of the Climate Leadership Council to help promote revenue-neutral carbon tax. We joined the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, which is voluntary collaboration of leading companies in our industry aimed at reducing climate-related risks. We launched our methane and flaring reduction programs in 2017 and achieved our targets in 2020. And we have additional plans for 2025 and 2030. Also, we are working with our customers on product sustainability solutions. On nature, we focus on identifying risk and opportunities in areas where we have direct control or influence. We're a founding member of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, whose objectives are to prevent ocean and plastic waste in ocean. At our lubricant plants, we divert over 90% of waste we produce away from landfills with our Zero Waste to Landfill program. On people, on human rights, our business activities consist of several core elements, including adhering to the corporate policies and expectations, complying with applicable host country regulatory requirements, engaging with external groups. It also includes appropriate assessment and monitoring of labor and working conditions and people's access to basic necessities. We are an active participant in Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, and they're just some of the examples of how we're using the SDG Roadmap. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Boris. It's really interesting to hear all the different facets of your work on the SDGs and how you're using the roadmap as well. So now we have our final company intervention. So Penelope from Total, who's responsible for SDG accountability. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm very pleased to be here with you today during this webinar. So in a nutshell, who's Total? So we are currently an integrated energy company with a presence in over 130 countries, over 100,000 employees as well, which implies quite a large geographical presence. Our activities spread from the traditional integrated hydrocarbon activities, but also more and more towards green electricity generation, green gases, storage, and low carbon mobility. So in regards to our SDGs journey, we committed back in 2016 to contributing to the SDGs. And first through our reporting on non-financial, in our non-financial statement by mapping out our activities related to the SDGs. But in 2017, our CEO, Patrick Pouyanné, was recognized as an SDG pioneer by the UN Global Compact for our investments in low carbon energies. And while this is a great recognition, it also gives a sense of responsibility in the fact that we have to deliver a company strategy that is quite in line with the SDGs. So what we did is that we started by identifying those SDGs that are at the core level of our company's mission and purpose, in line with the fact that we are an energy player with such a large geographical presence. And we looked into how we could be limiting our negative impacts and accelerate our positive inputs into those SDGs. Then we identified the SDGs on which we can have an impact because we have a sustainability and responsible development strategy. And third, we identified those SDGs on which we can have either an indirect impact or a very localized one, because a company as ours is really touching all those SDGs, but we really want to avoid doing some kind of SDG greenwashing or SDG washing. And so we're implementing a new sustainability framework that is really in line with the SDGs. And one major piece of it is really our climate ambition to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, which accelerates really the transformation that the company is undergoing. This climate ambition was thereafter completed by a new biodiversity roadmap to 2030, and then after the reinforcement of our objectives of gender diversity and international diversity, and following that, the strengthening of our responsible supply chain management processes. So the company is really transforming. Tomorrow we have our General Assembly, and we're putting to the vote of our shareholders a change of name to become Total Energies, and a resolution which includes our vision of climate change, of energy transition, but also our ambition to become a reference when it comes to the SDGs. So it really shows the confidence and the importance that we're putting into sustainability, and sustainability is going to be much more in line with our strategy. And so for us, it was really important to contribute to the development of this oil and gas SDG roadmap. And it will help us internally raise the awareness on the SDGs alongside the change of name of the company. And it will raise awareness as well on all the type of different sustainability challenges that we might be facing. And on a very specific note, I think it will also help us frame the thinking around the social impacts of the just transition that we're all undergoing. So that is it for Total, and I'm giving back the floor to Becky.
Thanks so much, Penelope. Great work from Total as well, and lots of change afoot. And you were quite an early mover, I think, on the SDGs work. So that concludes a really excellent set of presentations, and I think really illustrates the urgency of the SDGs, as well as the genesis of the roadmap, how it's taken shape, and also how it's going to be used going forwards. So now we've got a few minutes left to take any questions. So a reminder to participants to type your questions into the chat box. And to kick things off, one for Bahira, you had some really stark and sobering stats in your presentation. So do you think that the 2030 agenda is achievable? And how do you manage to keep a sunny, positive outlook amidst those sort of data points?
Thank you so much. I mean, look, the intention was not to paint a gloomy picture for you, but to recognize that the reality of where we are in terms of progress is not sufficient, and that we need to accelerate action and raise ambition. Now, that doesn't mean we cannot achieve the 2030 agenda or the net zero goal of the Paris Agreement by 2050. In fact, there's a lot of studies that have been conducted that project and state that the achievement of these goals is possible. We have the means, we have technologically progressed, there is innovative financial solutions, there is commitment and action by a variety of stakeholders. So certainly we are moving in the right direction. What we need is a change of pace. And to do that, it's important to look at the progress that we're achieving as we move forward, and to look at what we need to do to change, what are the critical issues that we need to focus on as the global community to change that pace. So it is possible, and certainly we all have a role to play. However, this can only be done with concerted effort and collaboration with all actors, and it can only be done if we are committed to do more and faster. Thanks, Becky. Over to you.
Thanks, Bahira. Well, we agree. I think that's hence the title of the roadmap is Accelerating Action. So yeah, hopefully we can change that pace. Another question here for IPECA. Does IPECA have similar objectives to the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, OGCI?
Great question. Thanks for that. The answer, put quite simply, is yes. In fact, if you look at compare the membership of the two bodies, I think all but one member of OGCI is also a member of IPECA. We work very closely with them. They do different things, of course. They get a lot more involved in specific practices and technologies at ground level. But yes, we have very similar goals, and we are very well aligned.
Thanks, Brian. And then a question probably aimed, a couple of on reporting, which aimed at our company representatives, if you're able to turn your cameras back on. So one is about mapping the specific SDGs in your ESG reporting frameworks. So how do you use the existing frameworks of SASB or GRI to help you map the SDGs, if you do? And also, does anything exist to verify any claims you make in your reports about the SDG progress. So if anyone would like to take that.
I'm happy to take that one, Becky. Total was part of a platform of action that was raised by the UN Global Compact in coordination with the GRI notably. And they have developed a number of different documents that are very helpful, that allow to really identify what the SDGs and notably down to the targets imply for companies. And so we put together a reporting on our website where we can get by SDG down to the target to the information that is included in our non-financial annual reporting. And that information is assured by a third party. So it's not the SDG report that is verified. It's actually the metrics and the information that is contained within our sustainability report that is verified.
Thanks for that. Ma or Boris, would you like to add to that at all?
I completely support what she said because it's how we show it. But again, we're also, I think it's important what Filippo said before, that it's important that companies and associations, we show progress. So we have to start working on how we report progress on the compliance with the Sustainable Development Goals. There are methodologies that are under right now discussions, and we're looking at them. And I think we'll see reports like we're doing this annual Sustainable Development Goals report, how we comply with the 2030 agenda, but with a more concrete and standardized method, as we do see now in the different companies. But yes, I agree that it's important that we show progress in this.
Definitely, and that's something we want to pick up in our SDGs task force work as well. So I'm conscious of the time. We've gone a minute over. I'm sorry to overrun slightly, so we're going to have to finish our questions there. But thanks everyone for some excellent answers and of course some really excellent presentations. Lots of food for thought there, and if we didn't get to your question today, we'll endeavour to answer that offline. And please do feel free to get in touch if you have any follow-up questions. I'd like to thank our speakers today for joining us. Really grateful for your insights. And as we've said, this is a really important milestone for us, and we look forward to continuing our SDGs journey. Also, thanks to everyone who dialed in to listen. We hope that you all keep this roadmap in mind as you do your work, and we'd really encourage you to download it. The address is on the slide in front of you. I'll just move on to that final slide. And if you do have any areas for collaboration that you see, please do feel free to get in touch with IPICA, because we do acknowledge that partnerships will be critical to success in the SDGs. And a final note that the webinar has been recorded, so we'll share that in due course. And it just remains for me to say thank you very much again to everybody and enjoy the rest of your day.